Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing the book, Show, Don't Tell. How to write vivid descriptions, handle backstory, and describe your character's emotions. Writer's Guide series by Sandra Gerth. As always, I will link all the resources I use in the video in the description below, so go check out her book. I will only be covering some of the helpful tips and tricks that are in the book, so if you want to know more, go check out her book. Now let's get into it. So the book contains about 15 chapters. It is pretty much an exhaustive look at the idea of show versus tell. Chapter 1, Introduction, what this book will teach you. Chapter 2, Definition, what show, don't tell means. Chapter 3, the importance of showing, why showing is usually better than telling. Chapter 4, 9 red flags of telling, how to tell when you're telling. Chapter 5, the art of showing, how to turn telling into showing. Chapter 6, redundancies, how to avoid telling what you've already shown. Chapter 7, danger area number 1, how to handle backstory. Chapter 8, danger area number 2, how to handle descriptions. Chapter 9, danger area 3, how to handle emotions. Chapter 10, telling and dialogue, how to recognize it and fix it. Chapter 11, overshowing, how to avoid showing too much. Chapter 12, the uses of telling, when telling is a better choice. Chapter 13, exercises, how to exercise your showing skills. Chapter 14, solutions, how to rewrite the telling in Chapter 13. Chapter 15, conclusions, what to do now. We will only be touching on the first 4 chapters as well as Chapter 9, 10, and 11. On Thursday, we will be taking a look at Chapter 13 for our practical writing video. As you can see, I'm skipping a ton of information in the book, so please be sure to check out the book for yourself. Show, don't tell is probably the single piece of writing advice that beginning writers hear most often from editors and writing coaches. Authors who master this important technique take their writing to the next level and captivate their readers with powerful scenes that help keep them turning the pages even though it's 2 in the morning and they have work the next day. But how many writers struggle to understand this principle or have difficulty applying it in their own work? Even authors who have already published several books often don't grasp the finer nuances of showing versus telling. A foundational element of good storytelling comes to make sure your reader can feel like they're in the scene watching the events as they happen. By simply telling our reader the facts of the scene, it becomes clinical and cold, preventing our readers from emotionally connecting to our story. Every form of fiction requires an emotional element to be present to connect readers with their writer's story. While showing is critical to help create that connection, there are times that telling is appropriate. Here are just a couple times she mentions telling has value over showing. Pacing. If you show too much, it can slow down the pace of your story. If you show every little thing, you'll end up with a dragging 500,000 word novel. So whenever showing would disrupt forward momentum of your story, you can tell instead. Telling is great if you need to deliver a piece of information to the reader quickly, without slowing down the pace. For example, sometimes it's better to just say he smiled instead of his lips quirked up and his crow's feet deepened. There's a balance that needs to be met when it comes to the length of our story. For first-time authors, word counts are restricted at 100,000 for adults and 80,000 for YA. As writers, we have a tendency to explode past the general guidelines that most publishing companies use. The longer the book is less likely that somebody's willing to pick it up and read it. The exception would be authors who've already proven themselves able to sell books. While some might think it's unfair to limit the length of our stories, but one, more often than not, at least 10% of our stories can be cut without any issues. And 2, primary goal of any publishing company is to make money so they can sell more books to make more money. There are times when our writing becomes overburdened by the words we are using to create those emotional connections. There are times when pacing requires that we tell rather than show. Remember, we're always trying to tell a story while at the same time making our readers forget they are reading one. There are plenty of stories, both literary and visual, that are in need of the cold scalpel of an editor to render down those stories, making it easier to digest. That is why sometimes telling is necessary. Here are 3 options to know if you should be telling rather than showing in your story. To sum up, for every piece of information you give your readers in the first draft, consider 3 options during revisions. Show it. If it's important, show it. That's always true for characters' emotions. Tell it. If it's less important but still need it, tell it. For example, readers might need to know that 2 weeks have gone by, but don't need to know every minute of those 2 weeks. So use telling as a transition. Leave it out. If it's not important to the plot, consider leaving it out. Once you've gone through the process of figuring out if you need to show, tell, or cut, allow a critique partner or beta reader to take a look. and see if they agree with your choice. Getting feedback is probably the most difficult aspect of being a writer, but at the same time, most critical. With good feedback, a mediocre writer can hone their skill and become a great one, while a person who is unable to risk other people seeing it will never have the opportunity to see their story impact those around them. Chapter 2, Definition. What show, don't tell means. Telling means you, the author, give your readers conclusions and interpretations. You tell them what to think instead of letting them think for themselves. Showing means you provide your readers with enough concrete, vivid details so they can draw their own conclusions. Telling is like giving a second-hand report afterwards. Showing lets the readers experience the events firsthand, through the 5 senses of the character. Telling gives you the facts. Showing evokes emotion. Telling is also called narrative summary. Showing is dramatization. Telling distances the readers from the events of the story and from the characters and makes them passive recipients of information. Showing involves readers in the story and makes them active participants. The author goes into much more detail, so I suggest you pick up a copy for yourself. Most examples are self-explanatory, and for those with a fair amount of writing experience, this will feel redundant. But it is always wise to revisit the fundamentals to make sure you clear any blind spots we have for our writing. On Thursday, we'll be going over the exercises suggested in the book. The author believes that the practice is just as important as learning when it comes to our writing. Chapter 3. The importance of showing. Why showing is usually better than telling. Telling doesn't evoke images in the reader's mind. It interprets the information for the reader and robs them of the opportunity to think and discover the world for themselves. Another thought is that by allowing the reader to experience and learn about the world in their own way, it gives the reader a level of ownership of that experience. Very few people like to be told what to think, but if given the opportunity, we will follow an author through a winding story if properly incentivized by a livable world. Chapter 4, 9 Red Flags for Telling. How to tell when you're telling. Showing gives us a description of action, body language, facial expressions, and dialogue, so that we conclude he's trying to pick a fight without the author outright telling us so. If you're not sure if you are showing detailed actions or summing them up, try and act out what your characters are doing. If you can't, you're telling. Once we take the time to write our stories, we should always go back to make sure we haven't been slipping into the bad habit of telling rather than showing. Here the book goes into a couple different ways we can be on the lookout for telling rather than showing. Chapter 8, Danger Area Number 2. How to handle descriptions. Describe only what your POV character would notice given his or her background, personality, and situation. Chapter 9, Danger Area 3. How to describe emotions. The words you choose to describe a setting from a character's point of view can reveal a lot about the mood that he or she is in. The same setting can be seen in a different light, depending on what mood the POV character is in. The weather, or another part of the external setting, can also be a mirror for what the character is feeling. Examples: telling, it rained heavily. Showing, revealing an upbeat mood. Raindrops danced along the window pane. Showing, revealing a pessimistic mood. Rain lashed against the window. Sometime in the future, I'll be going over the book Emotion Thesaurus by Becca Polisky and Angela Ackerman, where we can enhance the emotional tells of how someone is feeling. Just remember, as a writer, there's a number of different tools we can use to create emotional connections between the story and the reader. Chapter 10, Telling and Dialogue, How to Recognize and Fix It. Maiden-Butler dialogue, also known as you know, Bob dialogue, is a form of info dumping through dialogue. The author wants to reveal some information to the reader, so he or she has the characters tell each other about that information, even though they both know about it already and have no reason to talk about it. Example: "That's not a good idea," Betty said. "Remember what happened last time we tried that?" "Remind me again," Tina said. "Well, our freshman year in college, when we lived with that guy whose girlfriend stayed over all the time." "Roy." "Yes, I know. I myself have fallen into this trap, trying to convey important plot information by telling the reader in this way. But with the help of my own critique partners, I was able to cut this excess scene, though it might be that I simply rewrite it as a setup for the main character. Always remember that important plot information should be sprinkled throughout the story rather than info dumped at the beginning of it. Creative dialogue tags. Some authors seem to think that readers will get bored with "said" as a dialogue tag, so they try to come up with more creative dialogue tags, such as exclaimed, demanded, or commented. Normally, variety and creativity are good things when you're a writer, but this is an exception. The best dialogue tag is always "said" because it is unobtrusive and doesn't distract from the dialogue itself. If you use dialogue tags other than said, or maybe asked and answered, you're telling. Avoid dialogue tags that explain the dialogue to your readers. Let the dialogue speak for itself. If the line of dialogue itself doesn't tell the readers how it is spoken, your dialogue is weak and needs to be revised. While the majority of your dialogue tags should be the word said, because it is invisible, there are times you should mix it up. Here I disagree with the author and believe you have 3 options when it comes to dialogue tags. First, using the word said. Second, no dialogue tag at all. This can be done in cases where there are only 2 people talking and you use a tag in the previous line. Third, using an action beat. This is where the dialogue is a complete sentence followed by the speaker acting in the scene. The last one is the use of adverbs and adjectives. This last one should be used sparingly as they are telling rather than showing. It would be wise to liken dialogue tags to like a salad. Most of the salad will be lettuce, with a mixture of toppings and dressing to enhance the lettuce, not smother it. So to recap, making it a priority to show the story and how it plays out on the page can help us build scenes in which our readers can feel as if they're watching it for themselves. Another way for us to help us create this in our own writing is to read how other people do it and see how they are showing rather than telling. We should also take the time to practice these skills on a regular basis, even if it's just a throwaway piece. Alright, thanks everyone for watching the video. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please let me know in the comment section. As always, I will be linking my resources in the description below. Until next time, bye.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go.